Where we at, guys? All right, so my name's Donnie Clapp. As you can see, I work at MERCURYcsc. I'm the Director of Emerging Media, and I want to welcome you guys to our webinar today, Camping. If it's not fun, how do we sell it? Today we have with us Maclaren Latta from our office, who is the VP of Customer Insights. We have Alyssa Ravasio from Hipcamp, and we have Vargas from the Clymb. So we're super excited to have them, and we're excited to share with all of you their insights into camping and their thoughts on what this study means that we've done, and also what the future of camping holds and how it's the best way to market to people who like camping, and maybe even people who don't yet know that they like camping. So first, let's go over to Maclaren, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the TNO forum and the 1,000 people that we have ready and waiting to answer all of our questions about how they feel about camping and how we came to this conclusion.
Good morning, everyone, or for those of you who aren't in morning time, great to have you. So we have the Think TNO forum, which is a proprietary panel of 1,000 people who are passionate about travel and outdoors, and we were really curious about camping and their thoughts on camping. And we all know that camping is big business, and so we are familiar with the work that the Outdoor Foundation has done, and everything around camping, and millions of people, over 40 million people were camping in 2013. So by all means, we're not saying that camping isn't a big business. We actually, on this webinar, we are all very avid campers. But we were talking to people who were self-identified campers, and what we heard from them is only, like, it was less than 10% used the word fun when they asked them to describe in their own words what camping meant to them. So that really was quite a surprise to us, and it was really fun for us to start digging into that and what that really meant. So I think this slide really sums it up, and this is from one of our participants from the Think TNO forum, is that even though it might not be described as fun, it's really a meaningful experience on a variety of different levels. So I just wanted to kind of just ground us all and talk about, okay, camping's huge business. It's, it might not be described as fun, but it is definitely much more complex than that. I'm going to turn it back over to Donnie.
Nope. There you go. Now you can hear me. So that's where we came from. We did this report. We found that only 9% of campers who self-identified as camping enthusiasts would describe it as fun. And then that got us thinking, okay, so what does that mean? How do we market to these people? How do we use this insight to do a better job of getting in front of them with messaging? So I'm just wondering, Alyssa, from your perspective as the founder of Hipcamp and CEO, what are you seeing about camping and it being a priority for people?
So I think, camping's it's an interesting activity that does involve typically quite a bit of planning and gear purchasing and packing the car and kind of all these steps people don't look forward to. But what we've found and what we see is that, what pulls people outside, what pulls people to camping is really a chance to reflect, to connect with nature, to spend some time with your family or your friends away from technology. That's a really big one. We love hearing about stories about just how different the dynamic can be between a couple or a family when the phones stop working. So I think, camping really is this chance for people to, get back to what matters most and do so in this beautiful natural setting.
Awesome. So, Luis, tell us what you're seeing based on your experience at the Clymb, and maybe tell us a little bit about what the Clymb is doing in the world of camping.
Well, first of all, I think something I realized that if you really want to understand camping as a man, you have to move to Portland and grow a beard. And since I've done that, it's been a game changer. You know, understanding of camping is just going. I'm joking, but actually, Maclaren is here with us at Clymb headquarters in Portland. And Portland is indeed a lovely place to camp. I thought it would be helpful just to share a little bit more of just some data just to ground us in when we talk about camping. You know, how big is the market, and what does that sort of typical camper look like? So I wanted to do a little bit of that right now. And when we talk about camping, it's about 6 in 10 households in the United States camp. So that's about 44% of U.S. households. So talking about 46 million households in the United States camping. And interesting, I think the technology piece is one of the interesting conversations, right? I think Alyssa called out how important it is and what a tonic it is to our hyper-connected life. But at the same time, you know, 83% of campers are taking their mobile devices, and at least 70% of campers will go online once. And interesting report saying that younger campers, so you know the 18 to 35, the millennials, actually rank having a mobile phone as important as having toilet paper. So I think pretty interesting to think about just how much that's valued. On the spend side, generally campers are spending about $500, a household about $500 a year on camping, and that varies a little bit when we talk about camping. You know, how do people camp? Of those 46 million households, you've got about 54% of them in tents, about 20% in cabin, and 20% in RV. And of course, there's other interesting places to camp as well, with yurts and lots of interesting places. So what does this picture look like? I think that the typical North American camper, you know, started camping with their parents, younger than they're 18. Generally, the first place people camp is in a tent, you know, taking the camping trips as a family vacation, generally staying in state or national parks, you know, these destination campers. And people usually don't camp more than about 150 miles from their home, which is, you know, an interesting thing to think about. And people are looking for kind of basic services, right? And as far as the retail market is concerned, the projections and the forecast there are that the business of camping, you know, for retail will be about a $5 billion business globally by 2019. So really interesting growth there. You know, largely driven by the continued focus on health, kind of the evolving lifestyle and the rise in outdoor participation. So some really interesting things to look at there. For the Clymb, kind of the shape of the business, we've got our largest camping vendor is a quality manufacturer that, you know, focuses on recreational and car camping, and that's what makes about half of our hard goods sales. So a really important part of the business for us. And just broadly, if you haven't heard of the Clymb, we are an e-commerce business. We sell gear, apparel, and adventure travel, and we're really about inspiring human-powered adventure. So camping is really central to what we do.
Awesome. Oh no. So Luis, yeah, all that's really interesting. Sorry, we're having our producer was having some technical difficulties here, but he's back now. Maclaren, I just wanted to, we're going to sort of interrupt the flow here because Julian asked a really good question, and I thought it'd be a good time to respond to that and answer that question. So the question from Julian is, what are the other descriptors used by the survey respondents? What were the top 1 to 3 ways they talked about camping? So Julian, thanks for that. Everybody else who's out there, if you haven't yet, you can click on the little square with 9 squares in it in the upper right part of your Hangout window. Switch over to the Q&A app, and you can submit your own questions, and we'll be answering those throughout this deal. So Maclaren, take it away.
Okay. It's really a great question, Julian. Thanks for posting that. It actually kind of gets into what I was going to speak about next. So if you want to really, I'd prefer to give you a really long response to that, but I'll give you a quick short, which is going to be a quick sneak preview of what I'm going to be sharing with everyone. And that is that, you know, it's much more complex, and it's much more. What I found really, really interesting is that they use the word fire. I mean, everything had to do with like a fire or campfire or cooking, and again, we asked them to describe camping in their own words, but that presence of fire really came up and was talked about throughout all the responses. Well, I shouldn't say all, but the majority of the responses. And which leads to, Donnie, is it all right if I kind of get into some, to go a little bit deeper into that response? Are you ready for me?
Yeah, go for it. I was just gonna, I'll set you up a little bit, okay? So you said that camping is much more complex than it's often portrayed, and we use that in the promo for this webinar, that advertising often presents camping as this very simple experience, but what our study showed is that it's actually very complex. So what can outdoor brands do? What can travel brands do to sort of address that complexity in their messaging?
So let me go ahead, and I'm going to share some slides with some interesting things that can be key takeaways that we saw and the actionable insights from the insights that we learned from the latest version of this pulse that we did specific to camping. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. So first here is, what we've been alluding to all along is that, camping isn't as fun as it appears. And, it's funny, it's like this public truth, and we hear people start talking about camping, and yeah, it is fun. I mean, we're not trying to say it isn't, but there is just this, incredible dynamic about it that that it's not just, all fun and games. So one example that we want to share of a brand pointing out that certain experiences aren't just about fun is Nike and its recent Better For It campaign, where it shows a more typical average women athletes, no one really hardcore, and it's capturing their inner thoughts as they navigate their way through their various athletic endeavors. So this screen grab that you can see, it shows, there's a voiceover that talks about why there's so many mirrors, and it's capturing this, this young woman's voice. So again, it's not just about the fun, and Nike's been able to do that in that campaign. So our recommendation is that if brands can honestly speak to those tensions between the fun, right, because there is the fun there, and the realities, they're going to be much better at connecting with their target audiences. And this target audience wants the truth. They don't want it all sugar-coated. The second thing that we looked at is that this idea, and this is what I was alluding to with the fire, is it's a chance to focus on the basics, right? And as Luis was talking about, there's still this incredible incredible time of technology that we're in right now, and that's still part of it. But there's also this, this really kind of desire to get back to the fire, the food, and the shelter. This aspect of really stripping down to kind of the bare essentials. And I love this quote from one of our Think TNO participants. Camping is a chance to be in a real world where I blend in with my environment and live the way all our ancestors lived. And we heard this time and time again throughout the pulse that we were doing. So our actionable insight here is that brands will be successful in using an emotional approach in their marketing and messaging that employs kind of those powerful, primal, even if you will, attractions of a simplified life, that fire, food, and shelter kind of connects them with their basic needs, if you will. The third thing was that camping is really important part of self-discovery and self-improvement. And this is so critical to this target audience. The opportunity to find more about themselves is this ongoing pursuit that we see them constantly exploring. So when you go camping, if you think about it, even if you've got the hugest, largest, biggest RV, you still can't bring everything with you. So we noticed trendwatching.com, if you don't get trendwatching.com's emails, I highly recommend them. They're great bites of information. But this briefing that they had from March talks about, thinking about how you can switch from what I have to who I am. And camping is a perfect example and opportunity for people to switch from what I have to who I am and really focus on what matters. And again, that self-improvement aspect. Various participants supported this. Here's a bunch of different quotes from several different people who were participating in the Pulse. Camping means less comfort, but more clarity, calm away from the chaos, a chance to escape the worldly constraints that bind us to an artificial environment. So these are really powerful statements and ideas and concepts. And hopefully, Jillian, this is getting back to what your questions were. What was the things that were coming up. So the key takeaway here is that brands that can show their target how to not only discover who they are, but also help them consider who they want to be, will bring added value and build loyalty with this target audience.
Awesome, Maclaren.
I got a couple more.
Oh, you got one more? Okay, go for it.
The fourth and final one is that brands that can leverage is that campers don't want stuff. We hear this all the time. They want experiences, and I'm not talking about just campers, but this audience as a whole, right? So, as noted in this quote from a recent article in Fast Company, our experiences are a bigger part of ourselves than our material goods. We're the sum total of all of our experiences, and I know we're all seeing this, and this is being reiterated again and again. But I do want to point out that this doesn't mean that this target audience doesn't admire lightweight tents or compact cooking wear or just about anything that is multi-purpose or makes camping easier. But the gear simply helps them to camp, and we need to remind ourselves of that. The experience, because it gets back to the basics, isn't ruined if they don't have the perfect gear, but they certainly like it too, right? Let's be honest. So the key takeaway here, and my final key takeaway, is that brands that focus on the realities and emphasize the meaningful aspects are really going to make an impression with this target audience.
Okay. So Alyssa, that's sort of our position. What do you guys at Hipcamp think about this sort of balance between the complexity of the emotions and psychology surrounding camping and the need to get sort of simple with messaging so you can drive home a point and get your brand out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think our brand and our perspective is stunningly in line with all those things you just said. So actually our slogan is "Find Yourself Outside," and that's a reference to kind of the outdoors and camping as being this chance to really connect with yourself and what you aspire to do. I definitely think the experiences as a priority specifically for this new upcoming millennial generation is something that is a bit of a struggle for traditionally hard good companies to market. But just as an example of, I think one cool way to kind of speak to that audience, we've been working this summer with the North Face on a series of campouts where everyone comes to this beautiful place, and they all receive a North Face tent when they arrive, and there's music and dinner. And it's a really cool chance for the North Face to show, like, we get it. Like, you're not here just for the tent. The tent helps you have this great experience, and really prioritizing that. So I think, experiential marketing becomes a really kind of interesting way to speak to an audience and help shape an experience that can really communicate brand value. So the North Face really wants to be like getting into music in younger audiences, and that's something we were already doing. And so finding those natural alignments with companies that can help communicate values, I think, is really cool. Another thing we're really big on is just the honesty. I think, Maclaren, you said, like, the grit. That's really important. We actually just released a video yesterday. I think it's in one of the showcase links. And it's this minute-long anthem about camping. And it includes everything from like the sound the sunscreen bottle makes, like when you have to slap that mosquito. Like we very intentionally avoided the natural draw to just do like the epic sunset and the like time lapse Milky Way, and really we're like, no, let's focus on the real moments and the experiences that kind of make camping this, full bodied thing that we love to do. And I think it's interesting to think about how those moments when you are cold and tired and your backpack hurts coming down from the day hike, that's what makes the fire so amazing when you get to camp. And so it's kind of understanding that, here we are in our, in our beautiful homes with all the amenities we could ever want. And actually part of us wants to be a little uncomfortable because it helps remind us, how good it does feel to be well fed and warm. It's almost like we have it a little too good, and camping helps us, get back to the basics and make us appreciate what we do have.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Camping isn't fun, but that's what we love about it, in a way. All right, so Luis, I'm going to throw it over to you one more time, and then we're going to go to a little bit more free-form operation and some more back and forth. But Luis, I just want to get your take on this question of complexity of the emotions surrounding camping versus how can brands really focus in and find the right messaging to reach people who like camping and get in front of them.
Yeah, a lot of what Alyssa and Maclaren, I would really echo. I think this concept that we're bored with the ease and comfort of modern American life, and we're looking, to be tested and to accomplish something. The humility of like, look, it's a first world problem, right? But we are, I think the success of things like Tough Mudder and the Spartan Race and all of those things, I think, are indicators of that, and the value of camping is the way it's capturing hearts and minds. It's really interesting thing to think about. But what I would do is share a little bit of camping from the retail space, because I think it actually answers that question, the way that brands and retailers are thinking about it. I think that the example that Alyssa shared about the North Face joining forces with Hipcamp is a really powerful example. The largest outdoor brand saying, we're not about necessarily top of the mountain, and Conrad, Anchor, and Jimmy doing Meru is an incredible achievement, but ultimately in order for our business to grow, we have to make it much more of a lifestyle. And I think that's a great example of that. So a major focus, I think, in the camping industry is trying to attract that millennial target and making that point a really fun and entry point. So I think you're starting to see big differences in the way that companies are marketing and in the imagery that you're using. I think the example I shared is a good one, from going from that elite alpine climbing, winter camping, sort of extreme backpacker to much more of the recreational state park. I think REI's current campaign and their new launch of a new brand called Evrgrn is a clear direction or attack on that market, right? Which is the festival-going, social camper. Other great examples, I think, sort of visually in product, are the prints, right? If you go back 5 years ago, you could choose a tent in what colors? Maybe red, black, gray, camo if you were blue. And now, you're looking much more at fashion type of prints. Polar has a print called Rainbow, and it is an incredible success. REI's Evrgrn. And you're going to see that, I think, a trend continue with major manufacturers, doing really interesting things with the camping collections. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you start seeing collabs with fashion, right? I think the time it's about sort of pimp your campsite, right, and making it really an extension of who you are, an expression, which I think is a really interesting thing. And comfort being king. I think the brand's going from like super light thermarest, to thick mattresses that you can carry in a backpack or in the back of your car. An interesting data point on that is one of our top vendors. Their #1 SKU in 2014 was a double sleeping bag for couples, and they didn't believe it. They actually did a physical inventory twice because they couldn't believe that this was actually their #1 SKU, which is really interesting. And then I think the whole side on backcountry electronics, waterproof, Bluetooth speakers, action cams, I think a dizzying array of lighting, right? Mood lighting for your tent, right? Which is really interesting. And I think, showing that there's actually for many people, there's little interest of leaving the hyper-connected life. It's actually bringing it and continuing to connect that as, we're increasingly wanting to share our experiences and our own personal brands. And then another interesting point thought about, which is that granddaddy, our grandparents, had kick-ass gear. They really did. And canvas and iron are super hot again. This whole notion of the number of the lumbersexual, which is an interesting trend. And almost every manufacturer has dusted off their original logos, right? This heritage and getting back to that. Cordura packs, Dutch ovens. In fact, if you're going to OR, which is just a couple of weeks away, I'm sure some of you are, there's a whole new section called Venture Out, and it's really capturing this piece. The last piece I wanted to share was just a little bit about how also the brands are trying to capture, trying to be a part of the conversation, right, digitally. And I think a great example of that is Polar with their hashtag campvibes. If you haven't been on Instagram, check it out. I think there's over 450,000 posts on that. REI's anchor campaign for the summer is Let's Camp. Interesting to see what content's going there. The Clymb has hashtag clymblife. So just really interesting conversations around this, around camping and how brands are trying to be a part of that conversation.
One thing just to build on what Luis was saying in terms of the REI's campaign, the image that they have on the front of their catalog this summer is this beautiful image of fire, and it goes back to that I was talking about, needing to show people this kind of this primal need or this primal attraction that they have.
Yeah, totally. Mac, just make sure that you're speaking up. We kind of lost you there at the end of what you were just saying. Luis, that Let's Camp hashtag from REI, I can't believe how well that's taken off. I think to me it's got to be one of the most striking examples of a pre-planned hashtag campaign actually working that I can think of in recent memory. And to me, that really speaks to the power of the myth of camping, of the emotional connection to camping, because so many brands with so many more resources have tried to get hashtags to take off, and they so rarely do. So to see the sort of organic success of Let's Camp for REI has really has really startled me. It's really been quite amazing. Alyssa, did you have anything you wanted to add? If not, we'll go ahead and start going into Q&A.
The only thing I would add is I think I think it came out a bit in your research, but just something I've noticed this pattern talking to I spent a lot of time talking to Hipcamp customers. By the way, I didn't introduce Hipcamp. Actually, Hipcamp helps people discover and book campsites. We try to make it more fun to figure out where to go, and are creating new camping spots by bringing on cool private land, like farms and big ranches. So I talked to a lot of people who have just been camping, and I ask them, why'd you go? Why do you do it? And one thing that gets repeated a lot that I think is really trying to think like how to communicate as a brand, because it's hard, is it's this chant to feel small and to remember how big and wonderful our world is and how we're just this little tiny part of it. And that's something that I keep hearing again and again. I saw some of it in your webinar, but I wanted to take a moment and highlight that, because I think there's something really, really powerful there that makes people willing to do all sorts of crazy things to chase that feeling again and again. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah, that feeling of being small is important in a lot of things. Even in a lot of the advertising that we create, we talk a lot about the power of an image that shows a small person in a big landscape, because it reflects the mental state that people want to have when they're out there experiencing the outdoors.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a few good questions here to look at. First one's from Bruce, and it's for you, Luis, and he's asking, what are some of the hottest selling items at the Clymb right now?
I think specifically, we sell a lot of Bluetooth speakers. I think a lot of the solar stuff is selling really well. A really interesting space is the thermogenic stuff, which is having a stove that is wood fueled, but at the same time is powering your beats. So some really interesting things there that we're seeing be really hot items. Broadly speaking, as a retailer, the usual suspects, footwear and things like that. But in camp, there's an interesting trend of new products, being really hot sellers very, very quickly.
Cool. Hey, Alyssa, I wanted to ask you something that has not been submitted, but it's something I was wondering. I know you guys have been sort of slowly rolling out state by state. What are your plans, and what are the next states that you're going to go into?
So I think we're at this crazy moment in the summer where we've actually done most of the legwork for the entire country. So I think as of today we're launching 6 states today. I believe we're launching another 7 or 8 tomorrow, and then maybe the last few on Monday. So if all goes as planned, by end of day Monday we will have full national coverage. I think as of today we're at like 38 states maybe. So yeah, Hipcamp's rolling out quickly, and that's with the when we expand to new states, we the first thing we do is we bring together all the camping across the various public agencies, so the county parks, the state parks, the national forests, etc. So that's the first thing we're doing, and then the second wave is engaging private landowners to offer, additional camping options on their, their ranch or their 40-acre oceanfront, property. And so that part is still, mostly in California, but expanding across the country as well.
Awesome. All right. Hey, so Mac, we have one for you that is, can you tell us a little bit more about the experiential traveler? And we submitted it, but somebody else voted it up, so we'll go ahead and ask you. Who is this experiential traveler we talk so much about, and what do they have to do with camping?
Right. So experiential traveler is a term that we use to categorize people who are passionate about travel and outdoors. They really value a sense of place, and they travel more, they spend more on travel, and that's combined with this need and really passion for the outdoors as well. So they're looking for experiences that aren't like everything else. They want something different. This phrase is used too often, too frequently, but they're really looking to get off the beaten path. They don't want to be where necessarily everyone else is. Now, that being said, we have varying levels of people who might think, getting off the beaten path is, somewhere super duper remote, like the Arctic Circle, and others who might just say that is, going down a street they haven't been down in, in the last couple days. There's varying degrees there, but there is that sense. They definitely are risk takers. That doesn't mean that they have risky behaviors, but they're willing to get out of their own personal comfort zone. And we also see that they're very independent and curious too. So all great qualities that we find are really interesting, that leads to these really insightful discussions. And how it relates to camping is, we went out to them and said, do you enjoy camping? Or, so this was something that we narrowed it down to talk to people who were, as we said, self-described campers.
Awesome. Okay, so we have another one floating to the top from our friend Mo, Sheriff Dean, and he wants to know what all three of you think about how we can invite new audiences into the outdoors. So camping currently is an example of a thing that has gone from what you might have considered niche in the past to something that's it's becoming more mainstream, at least the idea of camping. And that's not to say what it's going to transform into as a thing, but what are some other things that you guys think we can do to get new audiences to be interested in the outdoors? Families, minorities, folks who haven't traditionally been part of the target market, using your quotes there, Mo.
I can take a cut at it. Hi, Mo. Mo's a part of the wonderful Travel Oregon team here in Portland. Thanks for joining us. This is a question that we think a lot about at the Clymb, and then in my past life at REI was something that was discussed a lot. I think one of the insights that resonated with me from that work, which is, are there clubhouses that these people are already at that are doing it? As an example, there was a big focus to get the African American community into the outdoors, and the way to do we found there was some clubs around the country that were specifically doing that, and so joining that conversation, amplifying that conversation, recognizing that that they were already doing some of the best work and how we could support it, as opposed to starting another conversation. So I think that if you take a look at whatever market you're doing, it's likely that there is, there is some movement there, and trying to find that and supporting it and amplifying that, and that being sort of a law of entropy as opposed to trying to start a new conversation. So,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I love this question. I think we should all think about it all the time because from my perspective, this is the absolute key to helping create a world where, more nature is preserved and more good things happen with our planet and our environment. I just think if we can get more people outside, then a lot of things will start taking care of themselves. So that's our mission. So I love this question. And I would, I think depending on who you want to get outside, obviously there's different strategies for different demographics. I would say the meta pattern I've seen to be quite effective is to be very problem-oriented, and instead of jumping to like how to talk to these people or even where to find them, even though that's absolutely a necessary part, I think starting with the problem, like why aren't they already doing this, and even challenging that assumption, or like are they already doing this but just not in the way or the places we expect them to be doing this. And really understanding kind of, what those barriers are, and then finding creative ways to help reduce that friction. So with Hipcamp, I was noticing a lot of young people that just felt camping was too hard to figure out because everyone's expectations of web products is insanely high nowadays. If you live in a city, you're used to every website being gorgeous and fast loading and full of, very intuitive UI. And so the second you land on a confusing, county park website, you're like, whoa, this is just, I can't do this, and you back out and you go to Airbnb or something instead. And so I think understanding that problem, like young people, how do we make the outdoors relevant? You have to make it, something accessible to them. And just one, I think, recent event that's really exciting that I want to highlight is 4 days ago now, the state of California changed a requirement in their contract for a camping reservation. So they had a massive 10-year reservation contract for someone to provide all the software for all the reservations at all the parks. And they're now requiring that whoever has this contract has to provide open access to the data about the parks, about what's available. And I think this is going to be a huge, huge win in reaching demographics that traditionally aren't as relevant or don't find the outdoors as relevant, because what it does is it empowers all these different developers to build different websites that can speak to different people in different ways. And so I think finding solutions like that where we can change one thing that then empowers a whole group of people to go and build, various solutions to reach different demographics that they might know a lot more about than, we do. Those are the kind of solutions I love to look for.
Awesome. Okay, next up we have just a few more minutes left in the time that we promised everybody. So we'll try not to go too long, but we want to answer a couple more questions here before we sign off. First, again from Julian, who asked our first question. This is mostly for you, Maclaren. He's wanting to know how your findings apply to less escapist camping, like KOA, car camping, festival concert. Did you really delineate in your research between the different kinds of camping, the alpinist winter extreme versus the car, rooftop, urban, those kinds of things? And are the findings consistent across those use cases?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And interestingly enough, we had a good cross-section of people who were hardcore, ultralight backpackers, to them camping means, hiking in 5 days and, not seeing anyone, to those who definitely like the more pampered, maybe even the glamping experience, right? So, but what we found is that those 4 key takeaways and the 4 key insights, they varied depending on how intense they varied in their intensity depending on how intense that person's definition of camping might be. So they were still present, okay? They're still present, but depending on, how much people like to disconnect, or how much, even the KOA campers or the ultra RVers, they still had this desire for the fire, right? Like a campfire still defined camping to them. They had to have a fire, right? So, again, those levels of intensity varied depending on how intense of a camping experience they were having.
That is a perfect answer, Maclaren. Congratulations. So just one last thing. I want to ask Luis about the Clymb adventures and how those work and what the deal is with those. And then we'll sort of wrap up here, and I'll let everybody know where they can find us to continue asking us and continue the discussion in other avenues after this webinar is over.
Sure. So the Clymb's mission is to inspire and enable human-powered adventure, and a big part of that is actually offering active human-powered trips to all 7 continents. So about 2 years ago, we launched a travel business, and happy to say it's been the fastest-growing part of the Clymb. And we offer everything from really soft adventure, like walking trips, camping trips, yoga retreats, all the way to Antarctic expeditions and really top of the mountain aspirational trips. But it's a really important part of our brand, and ultimately I think it's not about the stuff; it's about what you do with it. We're really proud to be able to have a place where we can offer really great value to great trips all over the world. And to that question of what portion of campers go on guided camping trips, I'll just take a quick cut at that, which is I think it'd probably be a very small percentage. I would say less than 10%, maybe less. But I think it's also a really interesting market. REI launched their REI signature camps. And these high-touch sort of lower the barrier to entry, where all of the sort of pain is taken out, I think is really interesting. And I think that that's going to be a market that grows. Certainly REI is a good indicator of that. The REI, the signature camps are doing incredibly well, and I think we'll continue to expand. And certainly I think Hipcamp is another great example of interest there.
But
it is.
Just to elaborate on that question about getting more people outside at NOHAD, and going back to Fred's question about guided camping tours. I think too, as we look at accessibility and getting more people involved, I think there is some opportunity there. The other day I had a conversation with Glacier Guides that's based out of the Whitefish area, Kalispell, Montana. And they're seeing that people are, they want a guide because they don't know exactly what to do. And this was just like, for them, it was specifically for hiking. But they don't know exactly what to do or where to go. And again, if we can make it that much more accessible, I think it's going to continue to grow that passion and love for camping.
Okay, so Alyssa, we should probably wrap up. I don't want to keep anybody longer than we plan to here. But I have a couple things for you. One is Mike wants to put you on the spot and have you reveal your future business plans, because he's asking what, if any, are the other opportunities that you see to hack parks in the outdoors? What are the other opportunities to sort of disrupt in that way? And then while you're on, just tell us where we can find Hipcamp and where, what your Twitter handle is, where people can reach out and start a conversation about this stuff.
Sure. The hack parks. Okay. I'm gonna take one interpretation of that and then just write in, I guess, if I'm off track. But I think the biggest hack that we've just recently started, that I think will hopefully continue for many years, is engaging private landowners. And opening up all of these previously inaccessible spaces to campers, and that does a lot of great things. One, it creates more places to camp, which can be a big challenge especially around urban areas. But two, it creates this really it's really a whole new way to get outside, like these unique cultural opportunities to not only have a great campsite by the river, but stay on a lavender farm and like learn about lavender farming, because that's interesting. So I think that's one big hack that will make the outdoors relevant in a whole new way to a much broader set of people than the traditional kind of wilderness area or park. I think the open data stuff that's happening right now is fascinating. We have 49 more states to go, so there's 49 more opportunities. If you want to get involved, you should go to accessland.org. We will be continuing to advocate for open data on all those state park fronts, so join us. I think, just one interesting hack that I'll mention, because I do spend a lot of time thinking about camping reservations. The rate of cancellations is huge, and so just remember that when you're looking on certain websites that have data about what's available and they say everything's booked, they're very often completely wrong. And if you pick up the phone and call the ranger, they'll tell you, well, we actually we got 4 cancels this morning. And so a great example is Angel Island. I'm looking at it right now. Very popular state park here in the Bay Area, always booked, and always get tons of cancels. And so if you just call up the morning of, they're like, oh yeah, it says it's booked, but it's not. You should just come by. So I hope that answers your question for ways to hack the outdoors.
It totally does. And what's your Twitter?
We are on Twitter at Hipcampers, and on the web at hipcamp.com. And if you go to, I think it's on our homepage today, and just scroll down a little, we have our camping anthem video, which I think really echoes a lot of what we've talked about today, not just kind of the grittiness, but also kind of this chance to connect with the greater world and universe, and how much that matters to people.
It's beautiful, Alyssa. I watched it yesterday.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
I haven't seen it yet. I can't wait to see it.
Thank you for sharing it. I heard that in the office. I was like, oh, the climb, gee. Thank you.
All right, Luis, where can we find you, and what else do you want to plug?
Well, theclymb.com, of course. If you want to connect with me, I am Luis Vargas on Twitter, and I'd love to continue the conversation.
Maclaren, so 2 things. Where can people go if they are interested in getting these research reports that you're putting together that come from the research done with the TNO Forum? And then also, where can people go if they're interested or they know somebody who they think would be a good fit to participate and be one of the panelists on the forum that's informing our research?
Yeah, we always are looking for great new people to join the conversation that we're having with our Think TNO Forum. But you can go to MERCURYcsc.com and go to our research.
Awesome. And I'll just let everybody know that we are at MERCURYcsc on Twitter, and we would definitely love to continue this conversation. We want to thank everybody for coming today. I want to encourage you to go check out both the Clymb and their new, or not new, but successful adventures arm, and see if there's a trip you want to take. And also go check out Hipcamp and see if you can really improve your experience of finding the next place you're going to set up a tent or park your trailer. And we will see you guys for the next one.
Donnie, can I plug one more thing quickly?
No. Yeah.
Just wanted to mention that Hipcamp, like I said, we just moved into this land sharing marketplace. So if you do know somebody with land that might be great for camping, go to Hipcamp, let us know. We do have a $500 referral bonus, and we're looking for great landowners across the country. So I had to throw that out there. Thank you.
That's awesome.
$500, that's good. That's as much as I can get for referring somebody to be an Uber driver in Montana.
Oh, wow, good. I didn't even know that. Yeah, it's been really great. That's how we found most of our land. We've got everything from big meadows with private waterfalls to oceanfront 50-acre properties with absolutely nothing on it. So it's fun.
That's really cool. Okay, well, thanks again. We'll do a virtual round of applause for Alyssa and Luis, especially for joining us. Thanks to Maclaren for all the hard work she does putting all this research together and gathering these insights and coming up with the ways that we can think about these situations in a new light. And we encourage you guys all to keep thinking and let us know what you find. And we'll see you for the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.